All right, I have this memory. As a young programmer, one of the most ecstatic experiences I had was watching the line numbers fly by when I would run this program called Turbo Pascal. And today we have the person who wrote the business plan for Borland here with us today. I know him because I first met one of his daughters, Megan, at the Silicon Valley iOS developer meetup when she would come with MobClicks at the time, telling us all about the exciting new world of advertising in mobile apps. And Megan has moved on to do other things. And as I developed an awareness of Tim, I kept finding other children that he had that were running companies. He has a company that he founded that one of his daughters runs, and now he has another company that he was telling about here that more of his kids run, and now Megan is working with her brother, is it Paul? Paul, together at Rebel Mouse. And when I met Tim this afternoon, the first thing he said was, we stick together, because he's wearing a shirt from Rebel Mouse, where Megan and Paul are. And I kind of wanted him here just to hear about that. But when I looked into what he had done and what he really knew well, in addition to all of this, this thing about being Obi-Wan Kenobi of business plans was kind of intriguing, and I thought that's something that would connect with a lot of us, because we jump out with ideas, and what happens? If we start just running with our ideas and don't really think about them, we wind up out on a ledge somewhere thinking, how did I get here? What do I do now? And I asked him to come and talk about how we can think more critically about our ideas and go forward thoughtfully towards success. So Tim, please come out.
Thank you. Just take, yeah, there you go. I have a special request before we get started. Talk about fail-safe. Special request of Tim. Down there is my briefcase, and it has a power block for that MacBook that's powering this presentation. It's right there by the stair. No, you're looking at the wrong one. This way. And open it up, and it's very prominent one. Let's plug that. I think it had a couple hours battery left, but no, you don't. None of us want me to get about 20 minutes and something appropriate for large crowds. The battery's gone. So if you can, yes, thank you. And let us see if my. Okay, I want to start with this thought. This is, for me, this is about, I want you to make money, okay? And I know as I say that, I can hear that obnoxious guy on Shark Tank. What is it? I'm not talking about obnoxious. I'm talking about doing what you like to do, building great product, and in the meantime, having a life, having a job, and that leads us to a lot of business things. I too have had a life in software. I love it. I love that feeling when you'd press return and everything would work. But if you're going to continue with your life in software, at some point, the stuff that I've had to learn, sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't, but I've had to learn it, is about how we all do that and make a living while we're doing it, and maybe even make better than a living, okay? So that's why I start with this from somebody else. Mark Rooster has a blog called Both Sides of the Table. He's been an entrepreneur. He is a VC. I've been an entrepreneur. I raised VC money for Palo Alto Software, and now I'm a member of an angel investment group, so I have some of that, but I also like to give, unlike a lot of consultants, credit where it's due. This is his idea. It's be a line, not a dot. This is a writing that he had that I liked, and he, for the record, Mark Rooster, there's his bio, but getting to the point of that is that's his drawing. He's talking about how he feels as an investor. And what I'm going to say is this is not just about getting investors and getting funded necessarily. I love bootstrapping. But running your business right, being a line, not a dot, doing the kind of stuff that I'm talking, is going to make it better whether you're getting investment or just trying to make this company work and do what you like. I had this character flaw. I liked spreadsheets in the early 80s. I don't know what sort of genetic flaw does that people like spreadsheets. But I did, and I kind of built a business around that so I could make enough money to keep the family and still do stuff that wasn't boring. That's the key. That's when I say do it. That's what we mean. And Mark's be a line, not a dot has to do with business planning or business managing. When he meets them, they're a dot. Here you are today, January 23rd, 2013. Here you are. You've got this much development, these many users, these many downloads, this much app revenue, or what have you. Over time, he's suggesting that he keeps up with companies that he might invest with because he wants to see progress in making milestones. And that's at the core of what I'm talking about with business planning. It's setting your steps. Let me give you some... if you think about the process of walking, every step I lose my balance slightly. Think of the little babies somewhere between 1 and 2 that start to walk. You're moving forward and thinking about it, but there's uncertainty, and over a while you get more and more certain about it. Business, like programming, like a lot of other things, is also, if you do it right, trying to look forward, set the steps, and keep going. Business planning, which then becomes management, is also very much like setting your steps and deciding where you're going to be going. It's very important that we understand it like that, because there's a lot of mythology in this area of business plan, you know. And just show of hands, how many people, when they hear the word business plan, have this emotional reaction to that term paper 3rd year in high school for the English teacher who you hated? Can I see? That's what business plan does to people. And yet, if we're going to run our lives doing what we like and make enough money to have a life, then we're going to be working this process. It's planning process. Another analogy, I live in Eugene, Oregon now. We are 2 hours from Portland over a highway, well, it's I-5, but it's every bit as boring as I-5 from Davis to Fresno, for example. It's straight, right? Like this picture. And yet, if you think about it, even on I-5 in the Central Valley, or up in Oregon, when you're steering, you're constantly doing little motions. Now, as I think it was Sam in the last presentation said, sometimes it's, oh my God, veer left. And that can happen too. But even when things are going well, it's still walking, steering, constant course corrections. That's also what goes on with planning. We're not doing a document, we're running a company. And one of the things we do is look forward, look up, look down, set tracks, and constantly review, and that becomes management. Pause, by the way. If, while I'm talking, you have a question, please do ask it. Don't wait for the end. This is not one of these presentations, and I'll switch slides, and if you have a question, I want to know. I'm very happy. I love this topic, and I can bounce around. So just for the record. I want to show you an example. That is not the term paper that you hated 3rd year in high school, okay? That, in its grandest definition, is a business plan. That's it, right there. How does that work? Well, we'll get into that more, but you want to start with something. It's moving ahead. In this particular case, Somebody sat down and looked at things and decided, well, how many downloads, how many users, how much revenue do we get per user? This is kind of an advertising model. And so how are we going to be? They were guessing. One of the problems that you have is you think somebody else knows or something. They were just guessing, but they wrote it down. Why did they write it down? One of the best reasons to write it down isn't because you're going to show some investor someday, and maybe you are. I've been there. That's okay. But whether or not you're going to show some investor, if you write it down, then later on you can't lie to yourself. I've discovered as I get older that I don't get dumber, I get smarter because my memory edits, and suddenly I guessed everything right in the past. So we do that. We trick ourselves. But if you write something down, then it's pretty easy. Remember, this is business planning. There's another set of numbers. Those numbers mean nothing to you, right? It's just, here's what's going to happen. Here's what actually happened. But then comes this. Simple math. It's not a high school term paper. Anybody can do it. Now, suddenly, 2 months later, having taken the 10 minutes to write something down and then do the little trick to compare plan versus actual, we start to see things. This is why we're doing it. Now we're steering. Now we're managing already. I mean, the business plan that took 6 months? No. But already in our head, we're starting to manage this. Wait a minute. Downloads. Downloads were supposed to be 2,500, but it turns out they were only 1,763. Before we go on, we're thinking, we're optimizing. That's why I say even a simple sales forecast, you've started to do business planning, because if you're human, you don't have to be just a numbers person. If you're human, you're relating those numbers to what's going to happen, and when they don't happen, by the way, we'll get to that later, but just as we talk about, oh my God, this person guessed wrong. I have been dealing with business plans since 1974. I have never seen a business plan that was right. Okay? All business plans are wrong. This one was wrong, right? The red there shows how it was wrong. They guessed 2,500, but it was 700, and it was 1,763. And so how was it wrong? It was wrong by that much. Oh dear, we had that many fewer downloads than we thought we were going to have. That starts the management. That's why you do it. Maybe the world turns and you end up having a relationship with a potential investor, and then there's some communication things. Maybe you need to get people on track in your team, but that's essentially why you're doing it. Because now you're going to have management. You're going to be asking, did we guess wrong? Did the market change? Or did we do something wrong, and what do we do now? So here's an interesting thing. Revenue per user in this simple case was 18 cents a user more than we projected it was going to be. You see down below, revenue per user was 43 cents, and it's blocked, but it was 25 cents in the plan. So this is giving us action. This is giving us management already. And it's not horrible. I hate to do a presentation that has all bad news. So the interesting thing is, if you look at the numbers in this fake scenario, that revenue per user is pretty good, and they guessed wrong, but things started to happen right, and they were a little bit too optimistic, but there were some things that happened right, like they started to get more downloads, so that was bad. But over here, 3 months later, they made more money than they had expected to. And now we have business planning, and now we have management, and now we have a reason for what I'm calling a business plan, which is really the first step to business planning. And with that, you start to see, okay, here's why we're doing it. Because the business plans have a bad name. People think of them as that term paper, but nobody wrote a word here. But already we're starting to see how this gets us to start being a line instead of a dot, and now we're moving forward, and we're looking at where we were, and we're starting to manage, because humans can't help that. If you're involved in this company and you see that, you're going to be thinking about what else you're going to do, how to build that number, one number better, and how to do everything. That's the way we work. That's the way we think. So here's one of my keys. It's a new world, right? We used to measure. Now, decades of this, right? We used to measure productivity by how warm the seat was for how many hours, right? We can't anymore. It's not just business planning, it's management. That's crazy. We can't do that. We measure productivity by something else, and the something else depends. It might be lines of codes. It might be, in some of the business I'm involved with now, we're measuring productivity by tweets and retweets and followers and Facebook updates. But not warming seats, right? So what do you do to measure productivity? Well, there's where business planning comes back, because lo and behold, a simple, efficient, small, manageable business plan gives you, for those steps that I was talking about, you're putting forward metrics, measurements. How many downloads should we get? How much revenue per user? How much burn do we have with users? How much do they unsubscribe? We set numbers forward, and we're guessing, but as time goes on with the steps, by having recorded those numbers and recorded how they were wrong, we start to get management. And here's a problem I had. I took a company from just me to like 25, 30 employees. And the problem was I really liked what you do, and I didn't like what managers do or business owners. So I didn't do it. So I would have trouble managing employees. In the beginning, it's easy because everybody shares the vision and it's not structural. We just all work together. But get around 25 employees, and now suddenly somebody's got to be the referee and the boss. And I found that the business planning gave me a way to stake out my performance expectations, and then something objective and numerical that I could use with the people I was working with, so we could look at it together. And obviously, if you do this right, half the time they were working really well and doing a great job, but our metrics were off. Another half the time, it was the market changed and the assumptions changed, and that two halves make a whole. But then there was another half where they really needed to have a little bit of a fire lit under them. And with the business plan, we have the automatic system, so it's not like that horrible, I was supposed to do performance reviews with key managers every 6 months. How many of you have done that and been involved in that? Of those hands that are up, how many of you didn't hate that? Yeah. But if it's in the business planning process, then we can move forward. There's a book, Patrick Lencioni, Lencioni, has a book called 3 Ways to Make Your Employees Miserable. There's a noble objective, right? One of the 3 ways is to not give them metrics, to not let somebody see their progress objectively, some number. You know, if it's not sales, it's calls taken, it's lines of codes written, it's, everybody's thing is different. But the person who can see their number every day, independently of what their supervisor, owner, or boss or teammates think, here's my number, that person is more likely to like their job. Planning manages change. One of the myths that we dispel with good planning is the idea that why would you plan? Things change so quickly these days. How can you possibly know what's going to be happening next September when we're sitting here January 23rd? It's silly. It's a useless exercise. And I point to dribbling, whether it's soccer or basketball. In a well-coached team, The tall girl who gets the rebound after the opponents miss the basket knows there is a plan, right? She's supposed to feed it to the probably not so tall girl who probably dribbles better, and then they're going to go up the side, and then she's going to set up plays or whatever. The well-coached team has a plan, but the paralyzed team, where the players can't react to the opponents changing the plan, somebody interferes, knows that she's supposed to pass it to the point guard, somebody comes in and is ready to intercept that, well, then she has to change the plan, right? Does that invalidate the game plan? No, because there was a plan, when she changes it instantly, then the other players recognize that the plan has changed and they adjust because they know what the plan was, they saw why she changed it. Business planning done right is also like that. It's about managing the change as it comes. Real world case in Palo Alto Software in the Great Recession, October of 2008, our sales went down 25% in about 2 months. Horrible, traumatic. Did the plan then become useless because the sales suddenly plummeted? And, it was Black Swan. We had no idea. But the sales plummeted. Because we had a plan, it was like having a dashboard. Okay, sales plummeted, but let's look quickly at our plan, and it's like a net connecting things. Because when disaster happens and assumptions change, if you have the plan, you have this sense of dashboard where you can see what knobs you can turn, and one of the things you do is you look very quickly at discretionary expenses if sales suddenly fell, right? And if you don't have a plan, you run around saying, woe is me, what am I going to do now? But if you do have a plan, the plan helps you change it. The other part of dribbling that I like as metaphor is if you think about dribbling, you have to be able to watch the horizon at the same time that you're watching your hands, or if it's soccer, your feet, right? You have to look up and look down very quickly. In business planning, if you lose attention to the horizon and the long-term objectives because you're putting out the fires or dealing with the specifics too much, you're doomed. But if you deal with the specifics too much and forget the long term, you're also doomed. And the business planning process gives you a way to remind yourself and others on your team, oh, wait a minute, my recommendation is as soon as an organization starts to grow, and even when it's just an individual, 1 day a month. Years and years, we always did it over lunch the third Thursday of the month. Just an hour or two to check on what's going on, to look up, to think about our plan versus actual, and how do we review and revise. It's not a 6-month process. It's not a term paper. It's look at it quickly, review it, and revise it. So this is about that. This is here because I want to remind myself and you as I talk that this is not about that business plan that you think. This is about planning to get to where you want to go. That's why we say do it. So the business plan is what's going to happen and why and how much and who. The business plan is not the paper document. It's not the elevator speech. It's not the pitch. Those are outputs. There's a lot of misconception now about, well, you don't have to do a business plan because all you have to do is a pitch. Well, I'm in an angel investment group, right? We make investment decisions. We listen to pitches. And a pitch without a plan behind it is like, how many of you saw Waterworld, Kevin Costner? Rumor has it that that movie was done without a screenplay. I have only vague memories of that movie because it was so boring. Well, that's what happens when people start pitching without a plan, because we, the investors, will say, how much headcount does that mean? And, oh dear, it's not on the pitch. And they might invent something. And would you be able to do that with what if we doubled your headcount? What would happen? And you can just see the deer in the headlights. The right answer to that is take us some to look at the model, and we could get back to you with that. But it looks like we'd be able to do it. They're thinking back to their plan and their financial model and how they're going to do it. They're not just doing a pitch. So form follows function. If you're running a business for yourself and you don't have a business plan event, business plan events are you have to go to the bank or you need to get investors. No business plan event, then why the hell would you describe your company in text? What, to yourself? Why would you describe your management team in business planning in text if it's just to you? The business plan form follows function. What you will be doing is reminding yourself about strategy and watching your numbers and seeing a plan versus actual so you can manage the company better. You'll be putting up the metrics. You'll be being a line, not a dot, because you'll be accumulating these milestones. How many users, how many downloads, how much revenue? And where were we? One of the best pitches I ever saw as an angel investor, it was the people who own the most popular scan app on the iPhone. And they were pitching us, and their main guy said something about 150,000 downloads, and another one of their team, a woman, piped up and said, no, actually, Zach, that's over 225 now. And Zach says, no kidding, really? She said, yeah, you haven't checked for a week, have you? And he said, no, I haven't. That's a good moment in a pitch. Those are lines, not dots. So anybody quickly want to guess who is the author of this quote? Yes, thank you. Unless you're in Spain, or France rather. Because if you're outside the United States, I said Spain because that's the last place I did a workshop, but outside the United States, it was Napoleon Bonaparte. I always say Dwight Eisenhower because Napoleon Bonaparte said it in French. But it's a good quote. Before I go on, think about that. That's core to what I'm saying after several decades with this. It's not about the damn document. It's about running your business. It's about creating your future. It's about essentially doing what you like, bootstrapping investors, bank loans, or whatever. It's about management. It's not this, okay? Now, back in the early 80s, I will say, business planning has changed. I had a lot of years back in literally Silicon Valley. I was in Palo Alto from 79 to 92. There were days when the investors were looking for sort of proof that you know anything, but that hasn't happened for a couple decades now. Nobody wants to see a long plan. And this one helps us all. Those annoying financial models, it's a plan. It's a guess about the future. It's not a report on a database. With due respects to the CPAs, they go into cold sweats when they see a properly done business plan, because in their mind, a financial report is coming off a database of transactions. And you can't do that when you're guessing the future. You have to summarize hypothetical fictional results by month, and you just have to guess. Depreciation in 2015, if it was $22,312 in 2012, for 2015 it's going to be $40,000. And the poor CPAs will spend days trying to create some model of all the assets that's going to be bought between 2012 and 2015 and when and how. And instead, the real entrepreneur will say, okay, 23,000 in 2012, we're growing, 30,000 for 13, 38,000 for 14, 42,000 for 15, and they go on, okay? The reference in the image is Stargate, 1994 movie with Kurt Russell and James Spader, where they went through a gate like that into different dimensions. And today is the Stargate between planning and accounting. Planning starts today and goes forward in ever-increasing aggregation and summary. That's the way it's supposed to be. Accounting starts today and goes backwards in time in ever-increasing detail. And that's the way that's supposed to be. And the confusion is some of the projected statements look so similar to accounting statements that people get lost. But don't you get lost, and don't sweat it that much. You're guessing. No business plan has ever been right. What matters is tracking it. All the crap that they sell you about how a business plan has to have great market research and how many users and so on. Maybe if you're doing an academic business plan competition, but in the real world, what you need and what the investors need is to believe the story of who's going to use this and to imagine how many of those who's are there. Market data, if you have it, is great. I'm not advocating ignorance, but way too many people think that it isn't a business plan unless it has some ponderous, heavily researched market data. A business plan is what's going to happen. And what you're doing is you're building your lines over time with what you've achieved. And your market, what you have to do is explain it. And I guarantee you with investors, if you tell them a story that this is going to help this person, give her a name, this is going to help Leslie solve this problem, give it a problem that that investor can relate to, and she will figure out the story. She will figure out whether there's a market, and she'll decide for herself. And those numbers they all put, nobody really pays attention. If the story doesn't work, the numbers won't work. Business planning in some ways is imagining stories and then figuring out how to make them come true. Stories tell the truth of the future better than some of the numbers. And that summarizes what I just said. Tim@timberry.com if you want a copy of that. Tim@timberry.com will get you there. So business plans, I'm going to skip over this fairly quickly, but there's a business plan, all right? If you need the damn document. Now, first of all, don't ever print it out if you don't have to. This is 2013. We're not talking about documents. If you do, though, a business plan, there's strategy and specific plans, okay? It's not a big deal. And the strategy is 3 things that I'll talk about, and the specific plans, I'll talk about those, but this is simple. This is not a big deal. This is blocks. Business planning is about interrelated, modular-type blocks that come together. There's a sales forecast, cash flow, there's a strategy that focuses on the main points, and it's to suit you. Form follows functions. It's only what you're going to use to run your business better. That's all it is. And it's going to be obsolete. Shelf life of a business plan in 2013 is measured in weeks, not months, okay? It's just a process. It's the next step, and you're going to keep doing it. So I do want to summarize strategy because I think it's easy. I think strategy is obvious. And I think everybody's strategy is specific, but I don't think you need a PhD to do business strategy. The riddle there is because I was trying to think of 3 components instead of 2, chicken, egg, and rooster, that you can't separate very well. Strategy isn't sequential. It's identity, market, and focus, and they all mix together. And I'll show you what I mean. But I have to talk about them sequentially because we're human. So it starts with this. Your business identity is specific to you and your business. It's like DNA. It's what you do better. It's what you like to do. It's who you are. It's what your resources are. Every business is different, and you have to look in the mirror, hypothetically, and figure out why you do what you do and how you're different from everybody else. So strategy starts with this sense of identity that you can, I like this, not to dwell on it, but I am never, ever in my life going to buy from anybody who promises me expertise and lowest price possible at the same time, okay? Can't be. You're lying to me, you know? And that, for me, is about core competence. Okay, how are you different? What do you do? And in this wonderful market we have that's splintering more and more every day, I mean, the phenomenon of this decade so far, it's about splintering. When I was growing up, we had 5 channels in black and white, you know? Specific to you and your identity, your keys to success. It helps you figure that out. And it helps people like the artist squints to see the landscape. Think about it. What is really important to you? Maybe it's your target market, maybe it's your user interface, maybe it's your, I know an app that needs to tie into a very old-fashioned database of medical records in order to work. You know, it's different for everybody, but think about what it is for you, because it isn't doing everything right. You won't do everything right. I like this exercise, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, because as soon as it makes people think strategically. And it's a good segue, too. Because if you bisect that thing along the horizontal, the 2 elements on the top are attributes of you and your team and your company, right? What are your strengths and weaknesses? It's really looking in the mirror. Now, I think you can change them over time if you plan on it and you do it. You know, like the company brings in more resources, your hires, your training, whatever. You can deal with strengths and weaknesses over time, but it's a snapshot of where you are right now. And down below that, you can't control. Opportunities and threats, you need to recognize them, but this is not something you can do anything with. You can't control them. And when you do that simple exercise, you start thinking strategically. You can't help it. In a group or even an individual, you start doing bullet points and you think strategically, and it moves me to my next part of strategy, which is your market. And it's the story, it's knowing the people, it's knowing the need. If you're going to build a successful business, I think the most important quality of an entrepreneur is empathy. You have to be able to figure out what other people want and what other people are thinking. I know, particularly the user interface people, it's so hard. I've been frustrated so many times with developing and publishing software. Why would they do that? Isn't it obvious they should do this? Well, yeah, but there's the lack of empathy. To do business right, you need to be able to understand people, and what I suggest is you take one person. This is like writing a short story. One person, and get to know that person. That's an ideal user, and you invent it as if you were describing a character in fiction. How old, what family, what does he do for a living, what car does he drive, what TV shows does he like. You get to know that person, and what that does is it leads you to market focus. The special fringe benefit of this, the serendipity, is sometimes the most important element of market focus is who you're not selling to. I've talked about stories. I think I'll skip that one. An understanding who you're not selling to. 2 meals. Very different markets. I know in my life, one of those meals, we had 3 kids playing elementary school soccer at the same time a lot. We had 3 of them close together. So one of those meals back in the 80s when our kids were growing up was vital to feed young bellies and still make all the 3 soccer games on Saturday. Had to be fast, had to not kill them. I mean, it turns out later it sort of kills them slowly, but we didn't know that in the 80s. So it was a very different need. It was a very different market. Now the kids are all grown up. So maybe it's my wife and I, and think about the different price points, the different marketing, the different needs, the different messaging to get those 2 different markets, and both of them are a meal. Think about soap. What are the needs and wants of a bar of soap when it's tightly wrapped with 47 other bars of soap on a shelf in Costco? How much is that bar of soap worth? How do you get people to buy that? Now think of a bar of soap that smells all fragranty and is really coolly wrapped and looks really nice, and put yourself, talking about empathy, as a person in a relationship, and it's February 14th at 4 p.m. Now what's the value of that fragrant bar of soap well packaged? Very different, right? Different markets. And that's strategy. Which market are you going to be in? You can't pretend you're going to be in all of them. The driver in the car right here has to make a choice. Whether it's apps or old-fashioned software or whatever else. I think it was, I'm going to space his name, but our presentation, is he still here, that related to rock history, had a really good element on this. You can't be everybody. And in business, you're often in that situation. You cannot go to more than one lane here. You're not credible. Third pole of strategy, all morphed together. Focus. It's hard to pull them apart because what I've just said is focus, really. It's market focus. But still, I've been doing this for decades. I don't have some academic database. I don't trust them anyhow. But I do have years and years of experience. And what I've seen is in business planning, in small business, in teams, in groups, in big business, it's pretty much predictable. Sort of an inverse relationship. That the more priorities or key points included, the less likelihood of implementation. Pretty much predictable. You know, the more cars on the road, the less environmental quality. This one, more teenagers in the household, less cash in the wallets of the parents. You know, it's an inverse relationship. And that works out. You know, you focus on 3 or 4 things, you can get something done. You list 20 or 30 priorities, and it's boring. Strategy is specific to you because it's the morph of identity and market and focus. Your business offering has to match your market. You don't want to sell cheap if it's really good food. The price is the message. It has to synchronize. So it's tailored to you. There are no best practices. I hate the phrase best practices. Best practices are obsolete by the time they became best practices. You have to look at everything specific to your case and never get caught on it and make some really tough decisions because you have to deal with the privilege, the principle of displacement, which I learned that this is so important. Displacement. You imagine what happens. I'd like to have a bucket full of water, and I'd put it right next to where are 3, well, there's 2 computers on that table. I'd put it right there on that table next to 2 computers. I'd fill it full of water. I'd bring a brick over, and I'd drop it in. And what you'd see would be displacement, the water splashing out. And I would do that dramatically because they'd be worried about their computers with good reason, and it would make a point. When you get into business and you're doing business planning, it's the same thing. Everything you do rules out something else that you can't do. And that's hard as hell because I've been there. We love it. I love making software. I love building companies. You want to do everything for everybody. But everything you do rules out something else that you can't do. So you have to make good choices. Business school. God, 35 years ago I was in business school, and one of the profs said, know what knobs you have to turn. What valuable advice. Don't sweat what you would do if you had $2 million. Focus on what can I do? What options do I have? How can I really move this business forward? And don't waste your time on hypotheticals. Focus on what knobs you have to turn as you do your business planning. Another quiz. Who said this? I know we're getting kind of late, so I don't want to... Yes, did I hear? Did you say Bill Cosby? Yeah, that's a Bill Cosby quote. I think that's my favorite quote in business strategy. And I was about to say not from some academic PhD, although Bill Cosby has a PhD in education. But that is a great quote. And just after we finish the quiz part of it, look at that. The secret to failure is trying to please everybody. That's really important. That's like my summary of business strategy. So we go on. So the business planning, that's strategy. By the way, the best strategy description I ever saw, I need a backspace delete. The best strategy description I ever saw in a business plan was 3 pages of pictures. They didn't even bother to write it. They were trying to do Victor's Secret, which was classy underwear for middle-aged and older men. And they showed a picture of Sean Connery and Robert Redford and somebody else in their 50s, and that was their target market. And they didn't have to write a whole bunch of stuff that reminded anybody of a term paper. There's strategy. That was their strategy. So now it's specific. Start with your review schedule. In my case, for years, it was the 3rd Thursday of every month. 2/3 of the value of business planning disappear if you don't acknowledge that you're going to review and revise and do course corrections, particularly with a team. So you start with what's most important. All right, people, we're going to look at this every month, and we're just going to spend an hour or two. This is not going to become a business planning company. We're software, we're apps. But we're going to review for an hour or two every month. And then as it goes on in a group, it begins to gain credibility and importance. But you have to do it. So you start with when you're going to review it. You identify assumptions. And here's why. As sure as you're born, your business plan will be wrong. And very quickly you'll get into the conundrum of, okay, do we keep going in the direction we planned with bad results, or do we move back and go in a different direction? And that's where no business planning expert and no algorithm and no software can help you. That's why humans do this, because it's hard to predict what's the right choice. Pivot or not pivot. These are real moments. And one little shortcut that will help is if you identified your assumptions, that's a shortcut to, if our assumptions have changed, then we're probably feeling pretty good about changing the plan. If the assumptions were right, then something else might be wrong. But you list your assumptions because that helps. I already said that. And this one, it's a classic consultant's joke, basically. In the standard American bacon and egg breakfast, what is the role of the pig? And what is the role of the chicken? I hear somebody knows it. Who knows the answer? Yeah, back in the back. Yes, thank you very much. The hen is a good correction, too. I said chicken. But yes, the hen is involved and the pig is committed. And I put that up there because your business planning thing, if you're doing lines and not dots, part of the planning process is metrics and performance and ultimately commitments. And one thing that helps with commitments and groups working together is in the business planning process, you discuss what's our budget? How much can we spend on this? How much can we spend on that? People argue or negotiate, but I need more budget for this. And what it generates is commitment. And then if you have the regular review and corrections, there's peer pressure. People know. And here's a good trick. When you think of something important that's supposed to happen for your business, if a face doesn't come to mind, a person who's responsible, then you're in trouble. If it's a group, oh, those people will do that, you're in trouble. If one face comes to mind, that's better. And this, it's just a fact of life. The way money works in business, profits don't mean cash. There's your profits. Your sales, your expenses, your personnel, that gives you profits. That's fairly easy to predict. But what happens is there's this balance sheet over there that has to do with assets and liabilities and debts and buying inventory 3 months ahead of time to sell it. For years, my company sold into the big box stores. We're mostly download now, but selling into the big box stores, we would build the stuff. Having paid for it 3 months ago, we would sell it today and we'd get paid for it 5 months from now. And we'd be profitable on the books, but really nervous in terms of cash because that was an 8-month lag. And you have to understand that if you're running a business, and we don't have time for it here, but just that it's important and how that works, and it's hidden. That's the Willamette River in Eugene, Oregon. That's right downtown. It's a relatively clean river. People swim in it. Upriver in the Cascades, they put on helmets and life jacket things and they go river rafting. Every summer, we get somewhere between 3 and 12 people drowning in the Willamette River. Never up in the Cascades where it's all whitewater and dangerous. Always down in town where it looks flat and inviting. Cash flow is like that. The worst time for cash flow is when you double your sales. So you just have to know that. You have to have somebody around who can help you with that. It's really tricky. It's like the worst danger for cash flow is sudden increase in sales. So this plan, I said form follows function. For those of you who do have a business plan event, at least recognize that the plan that you print out for your investors or your bankers is like the photograph of the teenager on the night before the prom, okay? It's how that was at one moment. And 3 weeks later, it's going to be obsolete. Another great moment in pitches I saw with investors, she puts up the bar chart of the financials, and one of the investors looks down and so on. That's not what you have in this plan. And without missing a beat, she says, of course not. We gave you that plan 3 weeks ago. We've revised it. And you know what? It worked. Everybody was very happy with that answer. This stuff, some people will want it. It makes the academics happy. I taught entrepreneurship at college level part-time for a while, and I made them do that. But ultimately, if you're going to make the decisions anyhow, do the best you can and move on. It's not about data. It's about guessing right. And it's about writing down your guesses so you can react when it's wrong, because they will be wrong. Business plans are always wrong. But they're also vital, because you can't manage without it. And over time, you'll see that you're controlling your future. You're managing your destiny instead of just reacting. And when the black swan event hits, maybe I have been overexposed to Cirque du Soleil, which probably has to do with family issues. But the last time I was in a Cirque du Soleil show, the acrobat twists down and lands on the net. It's supposed to happen. That's how they sort of dismount. They land on the net, and the net distorts itself on one end. But the net doesn't fall through, right? The net has some elasticity, and there's all these knots in the net and whatever, and the athlete, and then she jumps off and the net goes back. And why I say I must have overdosed on Cirque du Soleil, the last time I was in there, I thought, I'll be damned. That's like what happened with our business plan dealing with the Great Recession when our sales suddenly tanked. The net completely distorted, but because everything was connected, we had the knobs to turn to adjust. And that was a company with 43 employees in October of 2008 that had 43 employees also in October of 2009. Because what we didn't do was let people go. We cut everything else because we knew it would be hard to get them back. So that's planning. That's dealing with the unforeseen. A last slide with content in it, because I know it's 5. Palo Alto Software, the company that, yes, I was a co-founder at Borland. I've been involved with several, but this is one that my wife and I still own, okay? It's bootstrapped. We had VC investment. We bought them out, okay? The business plan for that company started in 1986. And today, as I speak, it's still not done, because it changes every month. The axe in that picture, that axe is 23 years old, but the handle has been changed 18 times and the blade has been changed 6 times, but it's still the same axe. Business plans, if your business plan is done, your business is done and you're out of business. So with that, thank you. There's me and my blog in there. That's what I want to end on, because you can contact me, tim@timberry.com, and I'm on Twitter, and I hope it helps. I am here for questions. I'm very concerned about time. I did offer you to interrupt. I'm not leaving if you have questions, but Bill, Tim, by the way, thanks to Tim and Bill for this opportunity.
So I thought it would be great to ask questions. It is getting late. Is there somebody that has a question to raise a hand, and I will run this mic out to you? If you have any questions, comments? All right, Maggie.
I was just curious if you had any further reading recommendations.
Thank you, Maggie. Yes, start with The Art of the Start by Guy Kawasaki. Definitely. Second is Growing a Business by Paul Hawken. And I have a book published by Entrepreneur Press called The Plan As You Go Business Plan. I'm an entrepreneur, I got to say it. For blogs, go to timberry.com, and I have blog rolls and stuff there. I've got a lot of information on timberry.com. I'm doing social media business plans now as one sort of sidelight, and some other stuff, but I think timberry.com is the easiest one, and it does show, oh no it doesn't, but that's berry like strawberry, not berry like B-A-R-R, it's B-E-R-R-Y, timberry.com. And thank you for asking that. By the way, can I do an editorial, no, it'll be a 30-second editorial? He's worried. He's worried. He's scared. I've been in startups and software and entrepreneurship since the early 80s, right? Slowly but surely, this problem is improving, but it's still not good enough by a long shot. I look out at you, and there aren't enough women. And startups need to balance that. The problem is the startups look out at the investors, and it's all gray-haired white men. Slowly that's changing. In my angel investment group, that's changing. But there's also a lot of stuff going on in startups where there's still that programming shit. And at least this ratio is changing. But everybody who's involved should remember it's hard on those minorities. And they're working harder. And the good side for business is they tend to be smarter than us. So let's open up and remember that the imbalance in ratios in startups is a problem for everybody because we're not doing our best then. We don't have a good match of the best and the brightest. So end of editorial.